what's happening. Jim Sciutto, thank you very, very much. Joining us now, Congressman Mark Walker of North Carolina. He's a member of the House Republican leadership, also serves on the House Homeland Security Committee. Congressman, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Wolf.
We have a lot to get to, but first, you were at that rally in North Carolina with President Trump when the crowd started chanting, "Send her back." What went through your mind when you heard that?
Well, there was an immediate dagger that went through my heart when I heard such comments. My wife, Wolf, is a two-time historical black college and university graduate. As a former minister, we have worked years in the inner cities, and the minority communities that value or put a little bit of trust and value in what we're trying to do in Washington, I immediately thought of those folks, not from the political gain, but to make sure that I do not want to support in any way, shape, or fashion a phrase that for decades has been represented to hurt people in the minority communities. Now, at the same time, there is a consumption over this, and I feel like they were overlooking some of the racially charged language. In fact, I just returned from the border over the weekend. The morale among our border agents, after being referred as concentration camps or drawn some kind of Nazi comparison there, has been very hurtful. I hope that we can put the energy and the emphasis on those that are using the language across the board.
That's a fair point. President Trump tried to distance himself from the chant, but he said he disagreed with it. He continues, though, to attack these women. And on Sunday, he tweeted that they are, in his words, not capable of loving our country. Do you believe that?
What I do believe, it is very hard to judge someone's motives or someone's heart. What you're left to do is sometimes judge someone's actions. And when you have people who are advocating things that are sometimes anti-Semitic or sometimes policies that we believe that hurt portions of our country, I think it is our responsibility as an elected member of Congress to call that out. I'm much more comfortable focusing on the policy. I know that we have done some, I feel like, great work when it comes to opportunity zones, criminal justice reform, even in fact in my home state of North Carolina. Go ahead.
I was just going to point out, though, that these are duly elected members of Congress. They were elected by their constituents in their respective districts. Even if you strongly disagree with them, even if you strongly criticize the words they're saying, you really can't question, though, can you, whether or not they love the United States of America?
I think it's very difficult to make that perspective sometimes just based on the language. I think what you have to do is watch a pattern of behavior sometimes to be able to make sure which way are they wanting to lead the country. And I think the president, he is politically incorrect, probably not as sensitive in some of these areas, but the American people sent someone to Washington to get us from point A to point B, even if it means scorched earth sometimes. And I believe that's why the loyalty that he has, specifically throughout much of the Republican base, has remained intact because he has accomplished some of these things. And much of this, Wolf, has benefited our minority communities. Listen, President Obama, solid man, solid husband. Nobody questions his moral aptitude. In fact, heck, I'd want my children to emulate the kind of husband and father that he's wanted to be. But some of the policies we believe, such as home ownership in my state of North Carolina, went down all 8 years under his leadership. What we want to do is talk about the policies that are impacting all of our communities for the better.
But the president, over the past 24 hours, said these four women, these congresswomen, are very bad for the country. And he also said, and I'm quoting him, they must hate our country. He called them racist, not very smart. He said they're not capable, again, of loving our country. Is that the message you want Republicans to run on in 2020?
I want Republicans to run on how impactful opportunity zones are. I want Republicans to run on the lowest unemployment rate in some of our minority communities. Top down, administration down. I want to see us talking about those policies because that's the policies that we can win again in on 2020.
During that rally, you were there at the rally in your home state of North Carolina when the president spoke. He waited for 13 seconds while the crowd calmed down. Then he began to speak once again. Did you tell the president that night after the rally how upset you were?
I did not see the president that night. In fact, I drove back to Washington, D.C. From Greenville, about 4.5 hours. But even that night, I struggled. I put out something immediately that night, followed it up the next day. The president knows how I feel. I've had a chance to voice it to several people in the administration, including the vice president, and that's something that we're going to continue to. And listen, the president in that moment, to probably 40% of the audience were chanting that. I believe he recognized that. In fact, in his own words, he said he didn't like that. And I believe in the future, if that was to take place, I believe that he would be focused enough to say, we're not going to do that.
40%, that's a big chunk of that. It was a huge crowd. That's a lot of people there.
Yeah, it is. I think that capacity was about 8,000. So yeah, I'm doing the math in my head. What's that, about 3,500 that were shouting that? But I will tell you, many of the people that were around us, that you could tell the looks as that was not something that we were very comfortable with. And Republicans must do better. If Republicans truly believe that we have the best policies for the minority communities.
Well, I just want to point out, and as you know, and all of us know, over the years, the president has very often insulted what's going on here in the United States. He's used some pretty tough language, but is he setting up a loyalty test here? If you disagree with him, you really don't love America?
I don't think so. I think that he is so rambunctious when it comes to his passion of doing it the way that he believes should be done when it comes to loving America. He does call out things, but listen, we've got a history of him branding and calling out different people. A lot of us thought it was almost humorous when he gave some of the nicknames to Crooked Hillary or Little Marco, some of those. This has been his style. It isn't something necessarily that we all agree with, but nevertheless, this is part of his winning strategy. I hope that we can continue to grow as a party.
Yeah, I was going to say, if the chant were to break out at another rally, I know he's got one planned for, August 1st. What would you tell the president you want to hear him say?
I would hope that he would condemn it immediately, but also want to give him the latitude to continue to focus on the policies. This is not just about the squad. There were 100 Democrats that voted against the humanitarian aid. This kind of hard left leaning is where the energy in the Democratic Party is. I would encourage the president to call that out when it comes to the actions by those that are advocating for such left-leaning policies.
Let me get your thoughts ahead of Robert Mueller's testimony on Wednesday. If President Trump is confident that the Mueller report showed no collusion and no obstruction, he keeps saying that all the time, why did he tweet that Mueller should not be given another bite at the apple?
Well, I don't know what his thinking was specifically on that. I would caution. Jerry Nadler, with all due respect to Hugh Jackman, looks like he wants to be the next greatest showman. I would say be careful what you wish for. Friends of mine, John Ratcliffe, the former Texas state attorney, I know they're going to be questioning about the origin of some of these FISA warrants, who was behind it, how this whole process gets started. I would advocate that Mueller, unlike Comey, is someone that may stick to the script as opposed to seeking the spotlight.
Because all of them are basically approved by a Republican appointed judges. The investigation concluded that the Trump campaign, and I'm quoting now, expected it would benefit electorally from information stolen and released through Russian efforts. Does that concern you when you think about foreign actors trying to do the same thing, looking ahead to 2020?
It should concern us all. It should concern us all how long it's been going on. I believe there was a said presidential candidate that tried to warn the previous administration that Russia was our biggest geopolitical threat. They've been doing this for years. I can tell you that between Russia and Chinese, we are cyber attacked tens of thousands of times per day. It should be concerning to all of us, and we need to do everything, members of Congress, to make sure that those elections are completely just and fair.
On a different subject, Congressman, President Trump hasn't yet endorsed the debt and budget deal that seems to be taking shape in these final days of Congress before the August recess. We're waiting to see the reaction. Would you encourage him, based on what you know right now, to get behind this deal and move on?
I have some concerns. I believe that we have to be focused on fiscal responsibility. It's one thing for Republicans to talk about it, but we've got to live up with $22 trillion in debt and the deficits that have been out of control. We've got to find some things specifically, maybe even in the mandatory side, to make sure that we're curbing that and not leaving our children and grandchildren a debt that they cannot repay.
So will you vote against raising the debt ceiling?
I've got to see all the details. I would be leaning that way. But right now, before I can make any kind of hard affirmative yes or no, I want to make sure to see what all the components are in this particular piece.
Because the government presumably would be in danger of shutting down if you were in the majority and you and others voted to avoid increasing the debt ceiling.
Sure. No, I don't advocate, nor have I ever advocated, that a government shutdown is good for the American people. It's good, not good for our economy. We've been 2.5 years where we're continuing to move forward. We want to try to find a solution to that. But Wolf, as I said earlier, Republicans can't continue to be talking about monitoring our spending and still continue to voting for every spending bill that comes down the pike.
Let me end this interview, Congressman. You've been generous with your time, with where I began, your outrage, your anger when you heard that chant at that rally in North Carolina. And I want to point out to our viewers, you served as a Baptist pastor, a minister for 16 years. You're chairman of the Congressional Prayer Caucus. When you see this talk that's going on, even if you strongly disagree with these four congresswomen of color, when you see the president say these awful things about them, even as you make some fair points about some of the things they've said, what does that say to you as a Baptist minister? What's going on with in our country?
Well, it's frightening, Wolf, that we have gotten away from political discourse, and I'm saddened by that. My job is to make sure that my speech and my tone, to quote Paul the Apostle, is seasoned with salt and with grace. I think of the many people in the minority communities that I love, and I cherish their friendships, and I'm going to continue to be out there advocating for those, because if we truly believe we have the message, the right message, it should be good for all communities.
Let me read to you from Matthew, for I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me. And also, love your neighbor as yourself. Is that what we're seeing right now?
I don't know that we could say that we're seeing that specifically in any aspect. It has become harsh, but historically there have been moments and spikes in our country where the rhetoric was harsh. I think what each member of Congress and each member of the administration, you have to do some soul searching. Is it just about winning the argument, Wolf, or is it about making a difference? And I think if you can look back and say, I want my time for me serving in Congress to be more than just making an argument, making a difference, I think that's where you can find the right tone and the spirit and the heart to proclaim what it is that you truly believe in.
Yeah, we got to tone down this rhetoric. Congressman Mark Walker, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Wolf. My privilege.
Up next, President Trump backtracks and now says he may watch former special counsel Robert Mueller's testimony before Congress on Wednesday. We're also keeping our eyes on Puerto Rico right now, where huge crowds are in the street once again demanding the immediate resignation of the island's governor.